Long before I developed my fascination or fixation or whatever you want to call it with espresso, I was a die-hard V60 fan. And that's because when it comes to filter, I find myself being drawn to mainly cut profiles with some nice acidity and higher levels of clarity. And the V60 was often able to meet those expectations, more so than other cone or even flat bottom brewers that were on the market at that time. But the V60, beyond its general popularity, was prone to inconsistencies. For one, with its bypass, which essentially means the water that's slipping by the coffee bed without really contributing to the extraction overall, and of course the dreaded stall, which is mainly due to its geometry and the flow of the fines migrating downwards during the brew, causing a painfully slow drain. So that brings me to the topic of today's video. This is the UFO Dripper, which, much like many pour-over brewers, is outwardly very simple, but engineered very specifically to achieve certain things. And at a glance, two main features stand out, and that is its much wider 80-degree angle and the deep channels running along its interior. And both of these things are aimed at achieving those bright and clear cups, all while being more forgiving than the V60. So with those claims in mind, today we're going to do some brewing and testing on the UFO. But first, before we get into that, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Standart Magazine. If you're into coffee, its culture, and learning about the world around it, Standart Magazine is the perfect addition to your brew bar or coffee table. With quarterly releases, they shed light on issues both inside and outside of the cafe, highlighting people who elevate the industry, and deep dives into new ideas around all things coffee. To sweeten the deal, each issue also includes a sample of coffee from some of the world's best roasters, to give you the full sensory experience. You really can't beat the combination of fresh coffee and fresh print. So head on over to standartmag.com/Sprometheus, use the link in the description or code Sprometheus at checkout to snag $5 off your own subscription of coffee and culture, shipped direct to your door nearly anywhere in the world with a money-back guarantee. And if you're still on the fence, you can actually try Standart today for just the cost of shipping. There's not much to lose and a whole lot to gain. As I mentioned in the intro, on the surface, the UFO Brewer is, of course, outwardly very simple. The unit comes in two pieces, a removable base and the dripper itself, both of which are made of a 3D printed Triton. And yes, that's plastic, and I already know that for some folks that's a no-go, but it has been tested by many third-party labs and it's BPA-free and food safe. And when it comes to coffee drippers, plastic is the most temperature-stable material, meaning it doesn't pull as much heat from the coffee slurry as glass or ceramic, meaning that heat assists more in the extraction and less in heating up the vessel itself, which is why you're seeing more and more new drippers coming in plastic. And speaking of new drippers, like many recent popular options, the UFO also utilizes flat filter papers that need to be folded accurately to fit snug and to ensure its main design features work as intended. Its wider 80-degree angle and these deep channels. The wider angle is said to have a couple of positive effects, the first of which is creating less of a difference in the coffee bed depth as doses are varied. So with the walls being noticeably shallower than the V60 for instance, this allows you to increase or decrease doses without a ton of adjustment in the grind size. And the angle also helps slow the drawdown of water through the coffee, because those large air channels, which are designed to both equalize the air pressure above and below the dripper, help minimize the chance of stalling as well as providing a more consistent bypass. And this is something that most, if not all, flat bottom or cone style drippers have, but in most cases it's more or less a big question mark, due to things like a wavy filter shape or less aggressive ridges on the V60. But from here, the question is, how does all this work in practice? Well, don't you worry, I'll feed you baby birds. Now that you've pictured in your imagination me feeding you like a baby bird, it's time to brew some coffee. So of course, to start, as I said, the filter prep is important because you'll want it to sit as flush as possible in the cone, and they do provide a little diagram in their website so you can check your angles. From there it's rinsed and then disputed to press it into the walls for a further seal. The finished product should look something like this. Now in terms of the recipe, we're going to follow the one on their website, which is a 15-250 brew with 4 pulses, 3 50 grams and 1 100 gram. But with a bit more detail that we'll get into while we brew. So once your coffee is ground on the finer side of medium, mine is at around 550 micron, and your bed is leveled, you're ready to go. Like I said, the first pour is 50 grams, and should take a little bit of time since it calls for a low and slow under 7 grams a second pour, followed by a bloom and gentle swirl, and all of this should take about the first minute. The second and third pours are exactly the same as the first, minus the swirl. Low and slow, 50 grams, and most or all of the brew water should have made its way through the bed in roughly 30 seconds before moving on to the next pulse. And finally, the last pour is where things tend to get a bit more aggressive. It's 100 grams total in weight, split into two 50-gram phases, a high and fast 16 grams per second poured into a circular motion to lift the fines up from the dripper wall, and then transitioning to a center pour for the final 50 grams, still high and fast, which is said to keep the fines suspended on top of the bed. And all of this should drain through, ending between 3 to 3.5 minutes. Now, I ran through this recipe a total of 20 to 30 times with different coffees and different filters over the course of the last few weeks. I even tried a handful of different recipe variations and had very consistent results, meaning a smooth, no-stall drawdown, even as I made the grinds finer and finer, all the way down to the 390 micron range. Also, the extractions always landed above 20%, and the brews themselves were flavorful and well balanced. But I have to say, when I brewed side by side using the same coffee, filters, grind size, water, and recipe, I still found myself preferring the V60. Even though it often ran a little slower, about 10 seconds on average, the cups were overall clearer, brighter, sweeter, and always without the subtle sourness and drying astringency in the finish I found on most of my UFO brews. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not a big pour-over or filter brewer, and I think my persona as Spro is kind of a dead giveaway. And there are definitely more skilled filter brewers out there, including Wataru Idaka, who used the UFO to claim second place at the World Brewers Cup this year. But as an admittedly intermediate pour-over brewer, I think the V60, even with its inherent fondness to stalling, once dialed in just seems to produce, to my palate and preferences, a more refined cup with less effort. And when it comes to the UFO, even though I did find it to be more forgiving with variables like grind size and dose, I did find it to be less forgiving in terms of how it's brewed. And it seems to require more finesse to approach the clarity and overall cup profile of even your basic recipe on the V60. But as I often say, and as many of us already know, coffee is very much a personal and preferential thing. So in the end, it may just all come down to that alone. But on that bombshell, I think it's time to wrap this one up, and as always, pass the conversation on to you. So what are your thoughts on the UFO Dripper? Have you tried one? Have you brewed on one? Had coffee from it? Or have any thoughts on its design? Drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications when new videos drop. Check out my Instagram at Sprometheus for more coffee content. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for unique exclusive perks. And as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy.